This video looks at the human breathing system and the main points that you need to know when studying for the Leaving Cert biology course. The human breathing system is composed of a pair of lungs and a series of different tubes. It is located in the chest or the thoracic cavity. It's really important that you're able to draw and label a diagram of the human breathing system. When we breathe in air, we inhale it through our nose and our mouth, and that is known as the nasal and the oral cavities. The nose contains little hairs which filter the air, and the mouth contains blood vessels at the back of the throat which warm and moisten the air. The throat is known as the pharynx, and at the bottom of the pharynx is a little flap of tissue called the epiglottis. The epiglottis prevents food from travelling down into the esophagus, also known as the food pipe. The next thing that you would draw on the diagram is the larynx, and the larynx is also known as the voice box. The next thing you would draw on the diagram is the trachea. The trachea is also known as the windpipe, and the trachea is made up of muscles, elastic fibres and rings of cartilage. Cartilage is strong, rigid material that prevents the tubes from closing in when air is passed through. The trachea is also lined with mucus and cilia, which are little hairs which defend against infection. The trachea then splits into two little branches known as bronchi. The bronchi is also lined with mucus and cilia and is made up of rings of cartilage and muscle. The bronchi then split into smaller branches known as the bronchioles, and the bronchioles do not contain rings of cartilage. In people with asthma, they have very narrow bronchioles. At the very end of the bronchioles, you have these tiny little air sacs known as alveoli. Alveoli are very thin-walled and they are 1 cell thick. Gaseous exchange, so the exchange of carbon dioxide and oxygen gas, occurs in the alveoli. Each lung has about roughly 1 million alveoli. The diagram that I've drawn here shows the alveoli and a blood vessel, and what happens in the lungs is carbon dioxide and water diffuse from the plasma of the blood into the alveoli. And oxygen diffuses in the reverse direction, so it passes from the alveoli into the blood and then on into the cells of the body. It's really important that you know that diagram. A typical question that they could ask you is to give 3 ways in which an alveolus is adapted for efficient gas exchange. What you would say there is that there's a huge number of alveoli in the lungs, so roughly about 1 million, providing a great surface area. Another thing you could say is they are thin-walled, so they are 1 cell thick. And the last thing that you could say is they are enclosed by a network of blood capillaries. So that means that diffusion can happen easily between the alveoli and the blood. The last thing you would need to draw in if they asked you to draw a label diagram of the breathing system is the muscles involved in breathing. There is 2 muscles involved in the human breathing system, and that is the intercostal muscles and the diaphragm. The intercostal muscles are located between the rib cage, and the diaphragm is located underneath the lungs. Please familiarise yourself with this diagram. We know that the heart and the lungs are connected via the pulmonary arteries and pulmonary veins. The pulmonary artery brings deoxygenated blood from the heart to the lungs. In the alveoli of the lungs, gaseous exchange takes place. The deoxygenated blood enters the lungs from the pulmonary artery and offloads this carbon dioxide into the alveoli. The alveoli will transfer oxygen to the blood to make it oxygenated. The blood is then transferred to the pulmonary vein and back into the heart. Another name for breathing is known as ventilation, and is known as an involuntary process. This just means that it's not under the conscious control of the human. At rest, an adult will normally breathe 12 to 18 times per minute. It's important that you know that when we breathe in, it is known as inhalation, and we breathe out, it is known as exhalation. You need to know for the exam the process of inhalation and exhalation. It's important to know that the brain controls the rate of human breathing. specifically the medulla oblongata of the brain. The brain controls breathing by monitoring the levels of carbon dioxide in the blood that passes through it. If we exercise vigorously, the level of carbon dioxide in the blood will increase. This will also cause an decrease in pH. The brain will detect the change in pH and carbon dioxide level and will cause our breathing rate to increase. During inhalation, the brain, specifically the medulla oblongata, detects the increase of carbon dioxide. This sends an impulse to the diaphragm and the intercostal muscles, causing them to contract. The diaphragm lowers and curves downwards. The volume of the chest cavity increases. This makes space for the air from the outside to enter into the lung. The ribs are pulled up and out. Air pressure decreases. The outside air is forced from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration and is drawn in towards the lungs. As part of the Leaving Cert biology course, you were required to study one breathing disorder. I'm going to focus in on asthma. As part of your studies of asthma, you're meant to know the symptoms, causes, the prevention and how to treat it. So you need to know that a symptom of asthma is noisy breathing and feelings of shortness of breath. It can be caused by the inhalation of allergens such as dog and animal dander and dust. It can be prevented by avoiding whatever you're allergic to. And to treat it, you can use an inhaler or you can use steroids.